DA, it's sort of hilarious every time this year in Leafs Nation, at least the last 8 years, there's like that cautious optimism. How are you feeling about this team?
Well, I think they're playing really well right now. They've won 6 of 7 games. They're getting contributions from a lot of different players. I think Brad Treliving deserves a lot of credit in the sense, he looked at the shortcomings of this team and why they haven't been able to sort of get to where a lot of fans and internally what the organization wanted them to get to. And that's probably overall balance and team toughness, not bringing in one guy, but bringing in a bunch of guys who are comfortable playing the playoff style hockey. And I think to some degree and to a large degree, Brad Treliving has addressed that. And, I liken it to the Vancouver Canucks guys. Jim Rutherford, Patrick Allvin, they looked at what was the problem with that Canucks team. They had to revamp that defense, right? They had to fix their PK and revamp the defense, Zadorov and Roenick and Susie and Cole, and they've done that. And look at what's happened with Vancouver this year. You look at the Leafs, and listen, I don't know if they're going to win in the first round or not. It's going to be they're playing, either Boston or Florida. Arguably 2 of the top 5-6 teams in the league. Anything could happen, but they're not going to get bullied. They're not going to be pushed around like we saw them get pushed around in that series against Florida last year. And granted, they could have won that series, but Bobrovsky was fantastic. But at the end of the day, Florida was much more comfortable playing their style of hockey, and the Leafs had to adapt to that style, and they were uncomfortable doing that. This year, if they are playing Florida or Boston, 2 disciplined teams, 2 teams who play so hard, and in Florida's case has a ferocious forecheck, I think they'll be much more prepared for that. So I think Leaf fans can feel a level of comfort knowing the team is playing incredibly well right now, and this could be a year where there's different results come to the postseason.
DA, you've been covering this team for a while now. Is there a different feeling in the air when it comes to with regards to this team? You're seeing Bertuzzi and Domi and Reeves come in and carve out roles and add a little bit more depth. And I remember in years past working with you when Nylander was on the third line or not having an off night, the sky was falling. Is it a bit different this year? And do you feel differently about this group than years past?
Well, it's funny because think about back to October and November. Domi wasn't comfortable, wasn't producing. Bertuzzi wasn't comfortable, wasn't producing. Reeves was relegated. He wasn't playing well. Then he got injured. Samsonov. It's been a real change in the last half of the season for those 4 players. And, Domi especially, he was flying last night. He obviously is feeling incredibly comfortable, incredibly confident playing with a player like Austin Matthews. And if somehow they can make this work where you have Domi up on the top line with Matthews, you have Marner kind of anchoring a second line with Tavares and McCann, and you have Nylander anchoring a third line. If somehow that can work and they get balance up and down the lineup, it's going to be really matchup problems for whoever their opponent is. So there is a different feel. They're still hashing it out. It would not surprise me at all if day 1 of the postseason we're seeing Marner back with Matthews. It wouldn't surprise me, but certainly Domi's making a case for allowing him to stay there. And hopefully Marner can find great traction with Tavares and McCann or whomever, and you have greater balance, and that's something that would serve the Leafs well.
Does Matthews get to 70 goals? What have you made of his campaign and the Hart Trophy conversation?
Well, to me, the Hart Trophy conversation is the most interesting race there is to be determined over the next 10 days leading into the postseason. As much as it's interesting who gets home ice and what the matchups are going to be, that's all very interesting as well. But I just can't remember for the life of me a Hart race with this many legitimate candidates. Do I think he'll get to 70? I'm not going to bet against Austin Matthews. He scored in the last 6 games. He needs, 4 goals in 4 games? That's the math. He has New Jersey, Detroit, and then Tampa and Florida. He's shooting. First of all, he's playing with a level of mojo that we haven't seen, It's a rarefied air what we're seeing from him and McKinnon and McDavid and Kucherov this year. It's really incredible. And he's very motivated, obviously, to get to 70 goals, something we haven't seen happen, since 1993. It's worth noting, guys, in 1993, Solani and McGillney both scored, I think, 76 goals. They didn't win the Hart, since you asked me about the Hart. The difference then, I think, is you had Lemieux at 69 goals. You had 2 other players in the 60s. You had 5 goals, 60 plus. You had 2 guys in the 70s. It was incredible, but I don't think it was like eye-popping, like, wow, because it was almost normalized. You could have Austin Matthews guys with 70 goals, and the next highest goal scorer has, let's say, 55. Reinhardt's at 53 right now, or maybe he'll be at 56, let's say. I mean, he's lapping the field. If he ends with 70 and the next highest guy ends with 56, he's scoring 20% more goals than any other player in the league. You have to acknowledge that. It's not just winning the Rocket, and it's not just scoring 70, but it's blowing away the field. It's lapping the field. So that should go into his candidacy. Having said that, what Kucherov's doing, what McKinnon's doing, and just the eye test, when you watch McKinnon, you're just like, this guy's unbelievable. You guys see that hat trick last night? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
It was EA Sports. It's video game. So I'm not sure Matthews is going to win the MVP, but you have to at least give high acknowledgement to what he's doing, and that he's entered the conversation in a year where Kucherov's going to end up with 100 assists, maybe 150 points. McDavid's going to have 100 assists and who knows how many points. And McKinnon, just the eye test, you say McKinnon, my goodness, what a player. So just to be in the conversation says a lot about the season Matthews has had.
Well, I think the difference is between now and back then is the goalies don't have Sears catalogs as pads this year in today's game. But there's been a lot of conversation and debate on what's more impressive. So what's more impressive for you and sort of the panel that you've been working on? That potential 70 goals or 100 assists when it pertains to today's game.
Oh man, that's like choosing between Betty and Veronica. There's no wrong answer there. They're both incredible feats. I mean, listen, 3 players ever, Lemieux, Orr, and Gretzky, have ever had 100 assists. So I don't want to diminish that by any means. And only 8 players ever have had 70 goals. So they're both incredible. Maybe the only thing that would diminish at all, and I'm saying this with an asterisk, the only thing that would diminish it at all is the idea that both Kucherov and McDavid are seemingly going to get 100 assists in the same season. But I don't want to sleep on that. I mean, think about the volume it takes to get 100 assists. And McDavid, listen, he scored 64 goals last year. He could have scored 64 goals this year. I'm sure of it. I think McDavid sort of says, what do I want to do this year? Do I want 60 goals? Okay. Do I want 100 assists? Okay. Next year, maybe I'll say, yeah, let's go for 170 points. Okay. That's what we're going to do. He's that good, right? He is just that good. It's really hard to choose between those two. Listen, there's not secondary goals. You have to put the puck in the net. So there's that aspect of it as well. Primary assists, maybe weigh a little bit differently than secondary assists, and it changes the dynamic. But I don't want to. You're putting me in a bad spot, Stewie. This is what you do. You put me in a bad spot.
That's my
the
move.
Haters are going to hate. 70 goals is incredible. 100 assists is incredible. I don't think we have to necessarily diminish one to build up the other. They're both incredible in their own right. I'm just going to leave it at that. It's not the answer you want, but what do you think? What do you guys think? Is 70?
Yeah, what do you
70
think,
goals?
Stewie? What's your answer,
70
Stewie?
goals. I just go back to the rock star status, being around a Kovalchuk or an Eric Stahl or an Ole Jokinen. These guys were 35, 40, 45 goals, and they ran the league. It was like you couldn't tell these guys anything. I could not imagine, the big wheelish attitude that Matthews had. 60 goals, it's unfathomable. And I was a guy that scored goals in junior, and 35 back then. You were a monster. So I can't fathom being in a room and just how easy he's scoring these goals. 70 for me is more impressive.
Listen, 70 is a huge number, and quite frankly, it's not even a number I thought about. Right? I look at Ovechkin as going to be the greatest goal scorer ever. He has 160 goal season, guys. One.
I know.
And it was 65, which is incredible, but he didn't sniff 70. So I think, and I've said this, and Stu, when we worked the shows together, I would say this a lot. I hope the hockey fans are taking this in. We are watching greatness with Connor McDavid. We are watching an all-time great player. In my opinion, he will finish with the second most points ever behind Wayne Gretzky, the greatest player ever. We are watching a generational goal scorer in Austin Matthews. I don't know where he's going to finish. It's too premature to start saying he's going to finish with the most goals or whatever, but he's on track to finish with the most goals ever. So let's just take that for what it is. We are watching greatness right now. We should take that in. Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, Connor Hellebuck, David Pastrnak. It's a golden era in hockey. We're watching some, you see Svechnikov with the friggin' Michigan on the road in Boston. I mean, not the first Michigan he's done. We are watching a level of hockey. Stu, you teach and coach up and coming, guys who want to play in the NHL, and at age 11, 12, 13, 14, they're doing things that 20 years ago NHLers couldn't do. Like that's the level of skill we're witnessing. And when you go to the elite top level of that skill, the Connor McDavid's, Austin Matthews, it's incredible. So I do hope people are appreciating what's happening right now.
Definitely. It's like, are you not entertained? I can't remember a time I've just been this pumped to watch NHL hockey on a nightly basis. You mentioned McKinnon. The whole Art Ross race has been something to document. Obviously, McDavid banged up, but the way Matthews is playing, Pasternak, there's just so many elite players in this league. DA, looking forward to the Stanley Cup playoffs. I mean, it looks like it's going to be the Florida Panthers here in round one. How do you think the Leafs stack up against them this year?
Well, as I said earlier, I think they stack up much better. I don't want to buy too much into the fact that over the last 28 games, the Leafs have the best record in the NHL, and Florida's kind of done a little bit of a slide. I don't think that matters. I think once the puck is dropped, opening night of the Stanley Cup playoffs, all bets are off. People who didn't take Florida seriously last year saw what happened with Boston, and I know they came within a Brad Marchand breakaway of winning that series in 5 games, but they didn't. And we know what Bobrovsky is capable of. Right? We saw last year firsthand what he did to Boston, what he did to Toronto, what he did to Carolina. They made that Carolina team look very pedestrian. Carolina scored 6 goals against Florida in a 4-game series. Think about that. So, and the Leafs scored 10 goals in the 5-game series. So we see how good, tenacious, and ferocious and balanced and deep that Florida team is. But having said all those great things, and I just poured effusive praise on the Florida Panthers, I do think Toronto is playing with a bit more mojo, a bit more swagger. They certainly have more depth on the blue line. You know, they can run 7-8 deep on the blue line. They're going to have some hard choices to make on who doesn't play game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. You know, like are you sitting Simon Benoit, who's been an absolute force? Are you sitting Mark Giordano, who's, you know, got a goal last night, is starting to feel a little bit more mojo? Are you sitting TJ Brody? Like, what are you going to do? Some of these guys, there's not room for all of them. So someone is sitting Liljegren. I don't know. So it's good to have those problems. And that wasn't a problem in the past for the Leafs. There was a lack of depth and a lack of maybe swagger. And I think this team has a bit more of that. So I think they're better suited. Having said that, there's going to be 3 or 4 teams that lose in the first round that had their eyes on getting to the cup final or winning a cup final, right? Like Dallas could be playing Vegas, guys, right?
Yeah.
You know, the matchups are incredible. It's not going to be an easy path for whomever. And the Leafs fall into that boat, whether they play Boston or Florida is immaterial. They're going up against a team that clearly has their sights set on the Stanley Cup championship. And you could put the Leafs in that category too. I'm sure with how well they've played the last 2 months that they're thinking we're right there. We can win a cup too. So I think they're better prepared, but it's not going to be easy.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Roseau. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.